My name is Bunk Rowe, and we are in Boston for the Fillius Jazz Archive, and I'm very happy to have Fred Lipsius with me today. And I've been looking forward, actually, to talking to you since 1969.
Really?
Yeah. And
some friend you are.
You never call, you never write.
I never called.
But I think it's obvious why. But you were, when I was a music student, I was listening to you play, and we're going to get to that. But I wanted to start out talking about jazz education. You've been in the business at Berklee since
84.
84.
33 years now.
It's been my observation in jazz education that many professors of jazz education go now through music school. They might get a master's, they might get a PhD, and then they start teaching. And I felt like you're a little different because you had some real life experience, right?
Absolutely.
Does it make a difference in your teaching?
I can't judge because I'm not sitting in watching other teachers, you know. Although I'm friendly with a lot of other sax players. There's about 15 of them, mostly jazz, a couple classical, in the woodwind department at Berklee. But I feel fortunate, you know, I forget that I came into Berklee at a time where you didn't need a diploma. Because if you were good, or whatever the criteria was, you know, so.
You had a resume, though. I mean, you had things that you could cite.
With the blood, sweat, and tears stuff,
right.
Mostly. I mean, arranging spinning wheel and
right.
Placing top 10 in the downbeat and Playboy poles on alto, which I thought was not funny. Not that I couldn't play, but here I am with one of my heroes, Sonny Stitt, a couple notches below or above him in the top 10 on alto, you know. But you know, it's a popularity thing, and not that I can't play, just, you know. So.
How have you seen the business change of jazz education in the last 10 or so years because of technology? The students that come to you, they've grown up in this, everything's available on YouTube and on Spotify and so forth. Do you notice a difference in the students? Well,
honestly, last 10 years or so, I've been teaching mostly private saxophone. I've taught everything, jazz comp, arranging, all kinds of stuff, you know. But some years ago I had found out more seriously that I had a hearing loss, probably from blood, sweat, and tears, from loud amplifier, you know. So I got kind of panicky, and I didn't know if I was even going to teach anymore. So I started teaching the woodwind department 15 or 20 years ago. So I have my little room with a Yamaha upright piano, and 2 people sit there, and that's it. Most of my students are not, I didn't ask at the beginning when I was teaching there, but a lot of them are really, that's not what they want to do, to play saxophone. So I do the best I can, but I don't get emotionally tied to them one way or the other. If they don't come in prepared or whatever. You know, I don't scream at students anyway. I'm just not like that. And if someone does great, I say, look, you listen to the teacher. I used to go home and tell my wife years ago, teaching different classes, I said, no one listens to the teacher. You're just being silly, you know, New York silly. But most of my students are at a lower level. Level 8 is the highest at Berklee, whether you're in ensembles or whatever. And I have like beginner improvisers, readers. Some kids, they've been playing for 10 years. I don't tell them because I don't want to hurt their feeling, but they had a bad teacher in high school or junior high, and they were like a band director. They didn't play, they didn't know about armature, they just gave them a horn. So they learned on their own a lot, and I don't want to tell them, they're like 1 year instead of 10 years. So I have to start from the beginning. You know, the one good thing for me is my sax teacher, I'm kind of going off a little bit. Like I said, most of the students are not, they're not high level, So there's nothing really to compare yet because they haven't been out there. And, I don't listen very much to, I go on YouTube. I've almost stopped because I just want to take a break from that. I still listen to Sonny Stitt, My Heroes, Bird, and all the old jazz players, and some new people, Personally, I'm at a point in my life I don't really want to be putting anybody down. We all have opinions, what we like, just like foods, or why do they pick my wife, that simple. But as some spiritual master said a while back, and I'm trying to live these principles now, instead of bringing out the bad in someone, if you have something bad to say, bring out the good, even if they're bad people, because it's going to bring out the better in you, and it's going to maybe open their hearts a little more, and you might change that person. So that's kind of a whole other trip.
Do you have a way to set these students up when you start teaching them improvisation so that it will be likely that they will play something they're comfortable with?
Down the hall, I used to teach a lab for improv, beginning and intermediate levels, two different, maybe 8 to 10 students, woodwind students, flute, sax, clarinet, even a bassoon once. I had to rewrite some music at bass clef. And, to get someone that can even play a little bebop is crazy. Anything, it's like, no one could do that. That's rare, But anyway. But I have about a 15-page, 30-page improv workbook that I wrote for Berklee. And like I tell the students the first lesson, there's about 10 or 15 good teachers here, like myself, or players like myself, and each person has their own way to present jazz to you. I start with chords and scales, That's basic in music. Some people might just do blues. I'm not teaching just by ear. That's not my thing, And I've had some students in ensembles that have real good ears that play good, so I don't think I have too much to teach them because they're naturally talented. Not everybody is with a good ear. But I have this book, so I start with chords. The first page is all the 7 or 8 different types of chords you see in a fake book, a real book, standard tunes, major, 7th, diminished, whatever, in the key of C, and it's just demonstrated with the tension notes, the 9ths, 11th, 13ths, chord tones and tensions. And then on the right side of the page, I have the chord scales that they teach at Berklee. I think Phil Woods years ago did a clinic. No, he was playing a performance with Hal Crook, one of the great trombone players, teachers here. And I laughed. He was playing acoustically, first of all, in a big auditorium that holds 1,000 people. And he says, kids, it's not all 2-5-1. And I thought that was very cute, funny, because most jazz tunes have 2-5s in them, But, and he didn't go into bad chord scales. But in those days, they had a T-shirt in black and white that had all 2-5 progressions, front and back, But I didn't learn chord scales. It was funny, I told some students years ago, I was walking down the street from one building to the next to teach, and a teacher, a piano player, I think it was Mike, I don't want to get the name wrong, so I don't know if he's still here. He's a little older than me, but he went to Berklee when I did in 1961. I only went for a few months. And I remember he had nice voicings and big hands. And I said, I'm just walking down the street to the next class, and he said, who? I said, who came up with chord scales? And he says, I did. This is crazy. There's like 300, 500 teachers back when I was talking to him. Now there's about 800 teachers with a conservatory merging in the last year or two with Berklee, Boston Conservatory. But out of all the teachers, I did. And my first book for Warner Brothers Music, it's about a 250-page book on improvisation, the complete book on creative improvisation. I call, instead of chord scales, I say scales to blow off, to improvise off, And I said, look, to my beginning students, or whoever, whatever level, I said, you don't have to know chord scales. It's a thing here. I use it because it's a helpful tool. If you have talent and you can move beyond that. When I listened to Coltrane and Bird, I'd notate their solos, whatever I could, as develop developing my ear when I was 14, 15. And I hear, oh, it's a ninth or something, you know, because my original saxophone teacher that taught Stan Getz back in the Bronx, Bill Shiner, he wasn't an improviser at all. Beautiful sound on the saxophone, you'd be jealous. He'd just fill up the room with beautiful, old-fashioned, little vibrato sound. And I have, that's this legacy, I have some of that. I have this sound, I think it's a beautiful sound today. I've gotten a lot of compliments. And it's the one thing that I feel I can give any student. And I tell my wife, I feel fulfilled. If they don't go any further with jazz or anything, if you get a nice sound, because I used to joke with them, I said, I'm not going to buy you a CD if you don't have a nice sound, because to me, you're not showing that you're a good musician. Play classical, jazz, fusion, whatever you want to play, but have a nice sound that appeals to the ear. Of course, it's just to the ear. Mm-hmm. But Bill Shiner had that. And so I give him a lesson about embouchure. I said, it's just diaphragm and the lower lip. I don't even care about the upper lip, although my teacher taught play a certain way. I said, you have the lower lip. I said, I did everything wrong on saxophone with a great teacher. I used to clamp on the reed, and I had this, what someone called a pea shooter sound, in a bad way. It was very small. And this is funny, I used to think when I was 14 years old, I blame it on my mother. I said, are you really my mom? You know, because I'm this skinny little, tiny little kid with no sound, so I'm blaming it on my mom. You know,
did you actually play with your upper lip under your
Well,
teeth?
he had, put your head down a little bit. You know, he taught Stan Getz, and all his students, and play. But I don't think you need this other than support, and with the slightest support, just to be centered in the middle of the mouthpiece.
Yeah.
But I have a friend, Noah Brandmark, that played with Woody Herman, that had a great sound, and it took me till I was about 30 to have a sound like him. He was 14 when we met. He was only studying a half a year with Bill Shiner, and he had this mature sound. I wasn't jealous, we were just close friends. But he'd play over here. We'd be silly, he'd play anywhere and get a great sound. And I could do that now too. If you have the pressure from the reed, you know, what makes the reed vibrate? It's just this. If you had a piece of wood and air going through, you don't need your lip. I'm being silly, or cardboard, and make it vibrate.
I see.
I was just clamping on the opening of the reed. So I have them start from nothing and blow as full as you can. But when your lip is on the reed, if you're not putting any pressure at all, it's not going to vibrate yet. So I said, slowly get tighter and eventually clamp the reed and back off slowly until you're vibrating and you're getting, like, I call it a buzz, like in your oral cavity. I can't explain it, but where it's like an opera singer, where you're getting the fullest sound and you're not doing anything, you have enough air to support it, like a faucet that works. If you want full volume, you can play loud. But you should get that buzz on a soft note too. Play, you know, whatever. And they find the center, and all of a sudden, for the first time in their life, they get the sound. They sound like me for a minute. It's like on a G, like a good note, not too low, not too high, because C is a little funny, G. And they go, whoa. I say, you got it. I said, I don't have to say any more. Now you know.
Memorize what that feels like.
And I'm happy. I said, that's what, and then if they're playing a little soft, they say, look, I play my horn. I said, this is what a professional volume is. I'm not bragging. And I fill up the room. I play soft too. I say, look, I still have the buzz. And I give them a couple hints that I thought of. No one told me this. 2 things to think about. Because I remember playing clarinet or alto, like it's a little mouthpiece when I was 14 or 15. Instead of you're blowing into this mouthpiece and you're trying to do something, think of it as the wall right over here, because in my room where I teach, the wall's right there. I say, imagine you're playing to the wall. Forget about the mouthpiece. You go, bah, sing it out. Or imagine you're on stage at Carnegie Hall or, you know, here, Symphony Hall, and audience or no audience, you're playing someone in the balcony, and just sing out the note. Don't overblow, but just sing it out and try to hear it nice and full. Oh, any note, you know, and they do that. So if they get the note once, I said, now you got it. It's up to you. That's what you have to do. And you don't have to play loud all the time, but if you're playing in a sax section, lead alto, you need to play full, or you're going to sound like an inner part.
Right.
You know, so that's what I give to them. Most of them can improvise that I've been teaching. I back them up on piano a lot, and we play standard tunes. And in the last couple of years, I felt, and I've told the students, I think I've been teaching wrong, jazz, wrong approach for a long time. There's no right or wrong approach, but I give them some old tunes like Jada, or which Doxy is based on. I don't know if you knew that, you know. And I pointed it out to them. I have them play both melodies or whatever. But some of the old standard tunes that Louis Armstrong is saying, 1930s, just great, beautiful melodies. And without getting into confirmation and great Charlie Parker tunes, let's start with something simple, a great melody. And I tell them too, I'm very melodic, and I think this helped with me with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, everything in my life, who I am, because I like to bridge to people. It's not for the pat on the back, Fred, you sound great. It's because I care about people. So I always believe that Dick Halligan and myself, as arrangers for Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and the original, not quite a leader, Al Cooper, I think we all care about bridging. And I don't think every jazz player does care about that. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you don't dig it, man, you know, whatever. I don't know. I'm just into, and it's not for someone to say, Fred, you play great. I know I can play. It's just to communicate. That's the way I am. Maybe I had good parents, I don't know.
Were your parents supportive of a career in music?
Yeah.
That's nice.
My dad was funny. He was in printing business with a couple of his brothers. And once in a while he said, when I was listening to Benny Goodman, my first hero, and he said, he'd go like this, you're playing, you blow that thing. He would figure it was a clarinet or something. But they were good. They got me a silver clarinet when I first started. I made the music class in the 4th grade. And the funny thing was, they played for about 40 of us. Piano, there was a piano, and the teacher said, okay, kids, is this the same note or a different note? And a lot of kids got it wrong. You know, I'm laughing, but I got it right. That's all I remember from the test. So I was in the 5th and 6th grade music class, mostly violinists, about 40 kids, and I played clarinet. And the first year, literally, I was the worst clarinet player because I was this tiny little kid that loved to play basketball. So when I played my clarinet, I practiced 20 minutes a day. Now it takes 5 minutes to put the horn together with the cork grease and everything, and 5 minutes to put it away, you know. And I want to go out and run, put on my sneakers and play. So I probably played 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, you know. But at the end of the year, the clarinet teacher that came in, he wasn't the teacher there. He came in a private room in the back. He teach about 10 of us. But when you're in the 5th grade, a little tiny kid, there were these twins, and they would play. And when we played, you play like a tune like Lightly Row. So we play like this. Blah, 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 blah. You take a breath for every note, because you know it was just so cute. You know, I think about it now. You know, so they'd make me laugh looking at other kids, and I was probably the worst. But the teacher would get us in front of our regular teacher, a homeroom teacher, who was a piano player, very sweet lady, and we played for the rest of the class, 20 violinists and 1 or 2 viola players, whatever. And we'd stand up there and challenge each other. We'd play some tune, and the clarinet teacher would pick who was the best. So at the end of the semester, he wrote in my yearbook, practice more. It was cute, you know. And for some reason, I really don't remember, I started to practice more, and I became about the 2nd best clarinetist in the class. And I remember hearing people in the project where I lived, in Parkchester in the Bronx, thousands of kids. And there were a couple kids that were playing sort of Benny Goodman tunes. I mean, much better than me. I could barely play anything, improvising. I was listening to Benny Goodman, my first hero, and trying to copy a couple licks. I didn't have any ear. I could play a couple licks and I felt great. I mean, 3 or 4 licks, that was it. But as a little kid, you feel wonderful that you can do anything, or play a tune, sing, 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 you know. But I remember some kids, I started to pass them as I got the next year or two or three, you know. They weren't so great anymore, you know. I remember my brother's friend was playing tenderly on alto when I first started playing alto a couple of years later after clarinet. And if I could even play the melody, forget about intonation or anything, you know. So
they stayed where they were, and you
well,
you got
they might
better.
have still improved, but I just zoom, you know, like Star Wars, zoom, getting away from the enemy, you know.
Was there an aha moment or an epiphany or something along the way that caused you to get better like that?
Not get better, but two things that I'm going to mention at this clinic I'm doing for some, mostly rock and rollers, a couple jazzers, this Friday, a couple days from now, Northampton, that I had mentioned to you. I was asked to do a clinic. So I'm going to talk about spinning wheel and importance of an arrangement to make good music. It's a good question. I'm forgetting your question. I'm going off on a tangent. The aha moment. First of all, when I was a little kid, I remember being in the crib. I'm the middle kid, and my mother used to play radio. And 3 years old, if I remember correctly, I'd be touched by the music. I'd hear like a Gone with the Wind theme on a French horn. You know, and I don't know if I cried. I mean, I was just a little kid, but music has always been there. And two guys in Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Lou Soloff, you'll probably mention later, and Alan Rubin, who sat in with the band and played on spinning wheel when Chuck Winfield was out. He had a problem with his lip, or his son was born or something, so Alan played on spinning wheel. But those two guys, somewhere during the time I was in Blood, Sweat, and Tears, they said, "You're a natural, Fred. You're like no one." I don't know that they knew my background, but they said like no one made you practice. I said that's true. You just had the love for music. Like one of them said, my dad or mom made me practice or something. I didn't know that. I just felt a little hurt that they were pushed because I didn't have that from my parents. You know, my mom used to say, "Are you still in there practicing?" Where I lived in the project, I could only play an hour a day because the neighbors complained. And when we moved, it was in the lease. Your son can only play an hour a day. It was crazy.
It was in the lease.
Yeah, when we moved to another place because someone had complained. And the guy that complained, I used to go to school with him. His son played clarinet better than me and influenced me a little bit. But he called me up one day. I'm like, you know, public school. He says, you know, I don't want to go into it. He said, you know, my parents were on the phone. It was just me. And he says, you know, you're not supposed to play more than an hour. And he put the fear into me. So, you know, I had years of being afraid of playing. Even now, I mean, I have a house, but the lady downstairs, very sweet. She says, play all you want, you sound great. And she's like 2 floors away from me, you know, just me and my wife. So I have total freedom now, but for years in other places, you'd have to wait until they go out of the house for groceries. And after playing with Blood, Sweat, and Tears and all this stuff. So I've owned my own house too, so that was the problem. But a lot of time, there's been that kind of anxiety or fear of not being sensitive to other people, not having them involved in me.
It reminds me of there's a anecdote about Bix Beiderbecke when he was living on near the end of his life, and he was playing in this house where he was staying, and he thought he was bothering people, and they go, no, keep playing.
We're sensitive.
We like you.
Yeah, we're sensitive. Coltrane, I heard, used to play at hotels. I mean, I tell a couple of students, just fingering for an hour before 9 o'clock or whatever. So I said, this is a real test because you can't cheat yourself. If you play a C-sharp major scale or any scale, do, really fast, you can just think you got it, but then play it on your horn and there's some notes come out quicker than the other. So it really focuses you. It's a great thing. I only did it once or twice. The other thing I want to say about growing up, the influence, whatever, besides naturally loving music in my heart, not knowing, it was just there. When I was about 7, I saw Satchmo, Louis Armstrong, playing with his group on TV, in black and white TV, when TV was new.
You had about 2 channels, right?
If that, and it was 5, 4, 3, 2, channel, it comes on. Yeah. But I heard them playing, and something, I don't remember the feeling, I just kind of remember saying it, and I said, Mom, I want to do that. I didn't even know it was jazz. And I've told people that don't know anything about jazz, you know, if I'm playing at a concert. Well, I don't want to be a teacher too much, but if I mention that, I said, you know, I thought everybody was improvising. At a certain point they are, but traditional jazz is you play a melody first, and there's a chord progression, a sequence of chords that follow a progression. And it might be 32 bars or whatever, which is a traditional A-A-B-A form, 8 bars, 8 bars, 8 bars, 8 bars. The bridge being bridging material, different material. And then you want to hear the last section again, like the A section, like Over the Rainbow. You want to hear it again, because it's so beautiful. The bridge is different. So I tell people, when Louis Armstrong and traditional jazz players like Charlie Parker, myself, and all those players, not the out players, they would follow the form of the tune. So they play the melody first, or stay close to the melody, and then they would improvise, whoever was improvising first, the trombone or the piano, and they would play one chorus, which was the whole tune, the form of the tune, 32 bars, and someone would say, okay, trumpet 2 choruses, so you play twice through the whole form. Might take 2 minutes or whatever, but you play chord by chord, the original sequence of the tune's form. The other thing is, with the 32 bars, I do this a lot. I reharmonize, I change the chords. A lot of jazz composers or arrangers do that because they want to be creative. I love Over the Rainbow the way it is, one of the greatest tunes, but I have my own reharm for it that I've never heard anybody do. It's not about being different, it's about doing what you feel works and opens your heart. So,
when you're playing on a tune like All the Things You Are,
I play it a lot.
are you actually thinking, okay, I'm on G minor 7 to C7, and are you thinking that, or are you not thinking that?
That's a very good question. And I've mentioned this a few times to some students that usually don't ask me, but I tell them, first of all, when I was younger, and a pretty good improviser, better than most at 16, there was a certain point where I started to become good. Listening, transcribing. I have a whole loose leaf book of solos, so I developed my ear, which was so-so, I think. You know, listening to Charlie Parker, Coltrane, even at one bar, write it down. Cannonball, you know, Sonny Stitt, Bird, Sonny Stitt, around the same age, and Cannonball, Next Generation. On alto, Coltrane and Sonny Rollins, those are my favorite. Not to negate Coleman Hawkins and Ben Webster and all those other people that are great. They didn't have the excitement of the 16th notes and the more modern sound. So I went to those 5 people I just mentioned. Now when I listen back to old timers, they sound beautiful. They're all great. Desmond, I didn't listen to too much. He was totally unique. It was too light a sound for me. It wasn't as exciting. You know, it's just me, you know. But as far as that goes, when I was younger, All the Things You Are, I couldn't play that tune too well on alto. And I was playing piano too. For some reason, the chord progression confused my mind. The first 8 bars repeat in a different key, and then the bridge is different, then it goes back to the first 8 with a tag of 4 bars. When I play that tune now, I'm being cocky when I say this, but I own that tune. There's certain tunes that I played so much that, and I tell the students, I'm not thinking chord by chord anymore on piano, even saxophone. I kind of see the chords. I know chords very well, but I'm hearing the whole line for 4 or 8 bars when I play, and I'm not playing the same thing all the time, you know. But I just hear that. It's like, you know the scene's coming up. Like if you're in a boat and you're going out to a destination, you know what you sing. You can see or imagine getting off on the boat and walking in the sand, and you reach the hotel or something, or whatever. I can kind of see that.
You can play or think a few measures ahead.
I'm not just going, I just keep going. And it's not about playing a lot of notes, but I can do that. And I show students, look, a good lick, Miles Davis play, da-da. Sounds hip. It's just as good as playing 20 notes. The other weird thing for me, and again, I'm not bragging about it, I just told a few people, if they even understand, something happened to me. You get older and things change, just life experience. I can't even explain it. But maybe in the last 10 years, I can't even measure that. I can play long, on piano and saxophone, long 16th note phrases. Whereas before, I copied and Sonny Stitt or whoever had his licks plus a couple of mine. Maybe I dovetailed them together. But there was a stopping point, like a wall that came up. But now I can play 2 or 3 times longer. It's like there's no barrier, like the wall got broken in the Iron Curtain or something.
Wow.
It's crazy. And it's not a bragging thing. It's like string players can play forever. It's not a breath thing unless I run out of breath. I can just play longer now, and there's more freedom. I said, wow, it's crazy. And I don't do it on purpose, but it's just like no barrier.
You think that's more up in your head than it is fingers?
It's a gift from God. I don't know what else to say. And I never have to use it because I tell people, when I listen to Art Tatum, the only album I ever owned by him was Piano Begins Here, and I say it should be called Piano Begins Here and Ends Here. You know, I'm joking, but I don't think there's ever been a piano player like him. I mean, Oscar Peterson's close, but for me, sometimes now, he plays too many notes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it. I'm just saying. My point with the students is, if you heard me and were knocked out by my piano playing, or Herbie Hancock or anybody, and they kept playing 16th notes all the time, to me it'd get boring. You need variety. So, or patterns. There's any and everything goes. I mean, go back to the classical composers. And I say this, look, as much as I love Charlie Parker, I'm not, what's the word, a jazz historian. I mean, I can't talk about the history too much, only the people I loved and some stories I heard, but I can't talk about their life, and I don't claim to. But Charlie Parker, to me, maybe the greatest improviser of his day, and he influenced everybody on all instruments. Not to negate Art Tatum, but he, to me, was a master compiler. It was very interesting. I thought about this. Because he took all the tunes of the day and all the classical he heard, whatever other kind of music he heard, and he was a genius, incredible ear. I'm sure he had perfect pitch, but whatever. And he was able to pick all these little things and play them in any key and put them together like Ella Fitzgerald and Mel Torme a little bit, maybe not as much as Bird, And that was the thing of the day. Sonny Stitt and a couple of people, they would play, whatever it is, classical piece. I don't know what piece that is, but Sonny Stitt plays that. But Bird would, and I noticed Charlie Parker, I only noticed this about 8 years ago, on rhythm changes. The first 8 bars of rhythm changes, usually in the key of G on alto, he would make a quote from a famous piece, jazz or classical. Humoresque, but he put it, they're doing this tempo, and he jazz it up, and it was incredible. Then he'd play his licks after that and dovetail it together. I loved watching his interview with Paul Desmond. There's something really touched my heart, for whatever he was with the drugs and everything. And, Desmond's saying, like, you've gone way beyond all of us, and, and he says, well, I practice 10 hours a day. But he didn't practice 10 hours a day for 20 years. It was only a few years. He died at 35 or whatever, But he said it very graciously with a little smile on his face, if you look at that video. He says, I just try to give the people something for the people. And I said, wow, that's so beautiful. And he's just playing so melodic, and of course, he played a lot of fast stuff. He wasn't showing off. And then he just played a little phrase with some vibrato, and it melts your heart, So he had everything, And so, getting back to a little of what I was mentioning before, for me, I had a fake book, the original brown fake book with hundreds of tunes in it, spiral bound. I used to play with a friend of mine a year younger than me. We used to play clarinet duets. We get together. and we go ba da 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 da. He'd play that, and I'd play, because I knew chords a little better than my friend. He had a much better ear, much better sound, which I never got a great sound on clarinet, and he improvised a little better. He used to play with the Lawrence Welk show when Pete Fountain came on. I couldn't do that yet. His dad was real proud. He was only 13, I was 14.
He played along with it.
He played along already. He was 12 or 13 years old. I couldn't do that. He had a good ear, maybe not perfect pitch. But then I knew chords, and I started to get better as an improviser, you know, as I listened to the greatest. That's the thing. I listened to the greatest players. So the melodic thing. So I'm playing with him. He's playing a melody, and I'm playing one note out of the chord. I didn't know ninths yet, and 11ths, and sharp 13, whatever, you know. There's no sharp 13, sharp 11. But I would play a note. And then we'd improvise a little bit, and we recorded when recorders first came out, these big heavy recorders, like My Fair Lady. My parents had that, we recorded that. So we were, the other thing too with me, my dad was an artist as a hobby. He did cartoonish, caricature kind of things. So I was pretty good in art, better than most kids. And I made a fake book, a B-flat fake book for tenor and clarinet, which I read out of. The two of us would read this. And it was, all the melodies were in black ink with a real ink, not Pentel, you know, and the titles and chords are in colored pencils with a ruler I'd use, so it's very neat. So I had about 100 tunes. I was very meticulous, disciplined, crazy that way. So, but my point with melody is, because I learned all these melodies from the fake book, and we played these, and I heard all the melodies, even waltzes that might have been a little corny. I mean, if you wrote the tune, you'd be a millionaire. But all the old tunes. And then I had one of the first play-alongs with the guitar strum, ching, 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 ching. And I'd play a clarinet, and I'd swing and squeak, I mean, you know. But I was so happy at 13 years old to be able to play a melody like these professionals. So if you could play a couple licks that you copied, I don't even remember, you know. So that was the thing, why I think I was really good as as a pick, you know, happened to be one of the arrangers with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, as with Dick Callaghan.
That's a great story.
You know?
And actually, I wanted to read. I was able to do an interview with Lou Soloff a number of years ago, and here's what he said. Partly.
You can repeat it.
Yeah,
No,
he's saying.
I'm kidding.
Lou said, "I'm saying the real creative force in that band was a particular arranger named Lipsius. Halligan also, but Lipsius was the prime creative arranger in the band. And he's kind of a shy, laid-back sort. And he would bring in this chart or that chart, and he really loved your writing. And he finished by saying, instead of saying, okay, we'll do this, okay, we'll record this, it was like some members would say, man, that's no good, no good. And he finally stopped. That was his take on...
He finally stopped?
He said you finally stopped because that there was people in the band that were not supportive of your arranging, I guess, or something like that.
Not the arranging, I was slow. I was a slow arranger. Dick went to Manhattan School of Music. I'm very close with Dick. And he's a great arranger, by the way. I spoke to him some years ago, and I said, we were just talking, I said, you know, I was slow. I went to Berklee a couple months, and I left. You know, so I wrote one shot on There'll Never Be Another You, just straight through a little two harmony, drop, whatever it was. I'm self-taught arranger, and I'm self-taught on the piano. I feel like a little kid. You know, Dino Gavoni, who teaches, a very good saxophone player across the hall from me at Berklee. I played piano once in his room. I was trying out the piano in his room. We all have pianos. And I played for about 20 minutes. He was smiling. He says, Fred, when you play, you're like a little kid. He said, and he loves me on saxophone, alto or tenor. He says, if I could play piano like you, I'd give up my saxophone. I was almost crying, you know.
Wow.
He said, he's just looking at he was smiling like he was just like an innocent little kid. He says, and I've had other people say that. I can't look at myself and I'm just, it's just very natural. No, I play totally incorrect Mozart fingering. No, I play like a crab fingers. You know, sometimes I get a voicing, but I'm very relaxed, so I can play very fast. I can't do what Chick and you know all the other people do, but I have my own style. No one sounds like me. It's not bragging. It's just the way from playing and playing and playing. That's like what the guitar player we're talking about. Just keep doing it.
Lucky.
Find your thing. So I play certain. I'm looking at my students, my saxophone students. How do you play like that? I said I just kept playing over the years. And I'm talking to them. I said, you know, I'm not really a piano. And I go, you know, 4 octaves down on some kind of pentatonic thing that's in my fingers. In the last 10 years, I got it. And with weird little crab-like fingerings and going down. And I'm looking at them saying, yeah, I'm just being silly.
Hey,
know?
that's okay. Thelonious Monk didn't have the greatest hand technique, right?
But getting back to Lou, I was a slow ranger, so I'm not going to mention any people, but I did maybe 1/3 of the charts. Dick was very quick. And 3 or 4 of the charts, one of them that became like, I couldn't finish. I got very emotional because I didn't have a technique like Dick was talking about, you know. He had to write for strings for the week, his assignment, or choral thing, or, you know, voices. And I didn't have to do that at Berklee, maybe once or twice, so I didn't get over that. So I was very slow, usually. Spinning Wheel was written in 1 afternoon. That's crazy. And I told my wife, whose favorite band was Blood, Sweat, and Tears. She's from Japan. And I said I wrote that 1 afternoon. I wasn't bragging. I just said, I'm usually take a month like Bobby Brookmeyer or someone I've heard is very slow, but he writes great. So if it takes me that long, it takes me that long, you know. But the thing about Lou, and I played at his memorial with Randy Brecker. I played a tune that he loved, a ballad called Folk Song that I wrote when I was 17, 18 years old, slow piece. He loved it, but he never recorded it. And I was going to play Over the Rainbow solo piano for his memorial a few years ago. And I found out that no one else was playing solo, you know, doing Gil Evans' band. And actually Lou's ex-wife played harp, but I didn't know that. And so I was getting names of people that were going to perform. I thought it'd be an ego trip. I'm the one guy coming from Boston down to New York area. Everybody else, there was about 50 musicians. Whit Marcellus played also. But most people came from New York. And when they asked me to play, Noah Evans, who was in charge of recruiting people, and Steve Schaefer. Is it Steve? Yeah.
Paul Schaefer.
Paul Schaefer, drummer. They were getting people. So the first group of people on the list in the email, and I'm thinking I'd like to play Over the Rainbow because I played it and it really opens people's hearts when my rehum and the way I play it. But I don't want to show off and being the only guy that's, you know, I'm coming down and I'm just going to play by myself. They asked me to play with the band, and I have hearing loss. I didn't want to play with anybody loud music. I don't care how good they play. I just don't want to hurt my ears anymore, you know. I want to hear the birds still because I have some serious hearing loss in the high range. But then there was another list a week later as they were getting this list together. And they said, Randy, I said, let me do something with Randy. Maybe Over the Rainbow with my rehum. I sent him, and this tune, folk song. So Randy said, let's do folk song. So we did that. Lou, we're pretty close. But honestly, when I've been with Lou at some clubs, like I was mentioning before the interview, when I went down to New York, one of the last times I played with him, I sat in, I asked if I could play. He was playing in a jazz club, only a few people there. But outside the club, I'm there with a friend of mine, and he's telling a couple other people, he said, Fred's the guy. He was the force or whatever, you know. I take it, but Dick Halloran was a great arranger. David Clayton Thomas, to me, was the best pop singer. He had the strongest voice. He could sing any kind of music. I love Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder, Stevie Winwood. But David could sing any kind of music. You know?
There was a big, fairly significant turnover after the first Blood, Sweat, and Tears
Yeah.
record. Did that come internally, or was that partly from like Columbia Records?
I don't think they had anything to do with that. Look, I'm 1/9, and I tell people I've written stories about Blood, Sweat, and Tears, little things,
Mm-hmm.
without putting anybody down. 'Cause I just don't want to do that. Because there's different views. I'm not perfect, so there's people that don't like me as a teacher. They don't like me because I'm a nice guy. They don't like my smile. It's just the way it is. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
Other people think I'm the best piano player in the world, or at Berklee, out of a lot of good piano players. And I never studied, some good people. So it's crazy. I've heard people say, you play better than Charlie Parker. And I'm going, I don't cry. So, I was playing a couple of years ago in a room, and Frank Tiberi, who's a great saxophone player, he's 88, 89 years old now. He's still bopping around, plays really great, more modern than me, but we're very friendly. And I think he was repairing my horn or something, but I was playing my alto, and he was in another room down the hallway at Berklee. Everybody else was gone, it was nighttime. And he was nice enough to fix my horn, do something. So I was really up on playing my horn. I wasn't playing all the time, but I just felt great. So I go into his room, I played a couple notes, which he's rarely heard me play. And he said, I'm being silly now, but he says, what kind of reed you got? What kind of mouthpiece you got? I said, Frank, it's not the mouthpiece. And he's a great player. It's like, I play good, It's
Yeah.
not, it's me,
Right.
If I'm out of shape, I might sound worse, But you should know that,
Yeah. Getting back to your writing charts, when you'd bring a chart to the band and read it down, did it usually come out the way?
I'm glad you asked me that.
Because this was long before Finale or something, that you could hear something back.
No, the thing that I was going to mention is the clinic too. Do to these young rock and rollers or whatever kind of music, do what inspires you. The intro on Spinning Reel, pa, 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 pa. I'm wondering, is that okay for pop music? That was unheard of, to have a sharp 9 chord. Only one other group, I love you, baby, and it's all gonna. And what's that group?
Yeah.
Frankie Valli.
Yes.
In the 1950s, they used sharp 9.
Right.
It was a sharp 9 chord, I think. But it came out so smooth. I don't think it was ever used in rock and roll before. And I did it, and I'm going, is this okay? With most of what I wrote, totally naive, and it became a number 2. So you just follow your heart. And whenever I've tried to copy too much, do what I think is, it doesn't happen. And then I do stuff that no one else has done. So getting back to your question, I was just thinking about this because I want to speak to these kids for this clinic in a couple of days. And we're going to talk about Spinning Reel and other, what makes a good arrangement. So on an arrangement I wrote, the band, Robbie Robertson and Richard Manuel, who wrote Lonesome Susie. I don't know if you ever heard it.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorites.
He sings it beautifully. It's very simple. I want to compare the two. It's not that Fred's arrangement is better. I just want them to hear what people do to color an arrangement or not color. And I liken it to a coloring book, a black and white coloring book for kids. Look, you can keep the picture of the duck the same with the little bits of water, or you can color in the water or the grass green or make it yellowish or make the duck white or, whatever color, So that's like brass or strings or whatever, So that's kind of what an arranger does. And also you try to enhance as an arranger. I hadn't thought about it, but now that I'm preparing to talk about arranging. But so anyway, on Lonesome Susie, I was in love with a girl named Susan so-and-so. She ended up in a mental hospital. Unbeknownst to me at the time, I was with her a short time. This is early on in the band. And it's like Taylor,
Fire and Rain.
Fire and Rain.
Yeah.
He was in a mental hospital or something, he was, and this lady he knew, I think, committed suicide, So I was kind of, not comparing, but I was very sensitive and loved this girl, I was falling in love, I don't know, one of my first loves, you know. And so I wrote this arrangement, wondering, is it okay? I'm using some Bill Evans licks that you hear the horns play near the end at the climax. That sounds like Rachman Stravinsky. It's very Russian. I have Russian Jew in me. That's not my religion anymore, but that was I was brought up into that. And to be da 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 da. That's like Prokofiev or something. A Firebird. There's a phrase that goes da something like that. So you pick up things. I'm not a classical person, but you know, I'm like chameleon. So I'm wondering, is that okay? So we're rehearsing in this big room at CBS Records where orchestras played famous records. And the producer, I won't mention the name for the album, we're just starting, and there's some intricate stuff there. It's fairly high, and it's out stuff. It's not like Motown licks, but it, you know. So Fred's writing something different. I'm wondering, is it okay? But it was motivated by inspiration. That lick I was just singing before earlier. That was like, I played it very simply in mid-range on piano. It's like a Bill Evans lick. B flat major to D7 to G minor. With a sharp 9 in there. Typical for me, I was listening to Bill Evans. McCoy Tyner was my favorite piano player. You know, all these people. So the producer comes in, the co-producer comes in, and he hears people making mistakes with the brass. I'm in this big room, and he said, sort of like a negative attitude, like, you know, that doesn't sound so good. Like, are we going to drop the horn thing? And I said, please, would you, you know, I think you were saying, Lou, I wouldn't settle for, you know. I don't remember me being like this because I was kind of quiet, but if something wasn't right, I would speak up, I guess, where I normally wouldn't as a person, but musically, because the force of music was so strong in me, it has to be this way. I'll give it a chance at least. So I said, go in your room and give me an hour and let me rehearse this. When I'm through and I'm happy with it, if you don't like it, I'll consider that and you consider that. That's another story. But don't break it down right away. You know, what do you know? I've spent a whole week on this or whatever. Go into your room. Leave me alone. And I've done this on a Eastern European tour. We played in Yugoslavia and Romania and Poland. And I saw the film of it. It never came out. But we were doing Lonesome Susie, and it wasn't with the producer. Something was messed up. And I said, no, that's not, you know, I got not angry, but I was the same way again. And it was funny because I'm the way I am now, I'm pretty laid back. I don't yell at anybody. I just don't want to, you know. So that's what happened. I spoke up, and I don't think I'm always like that.
Well, it certainly worked, I can tell you that.
Well, I got to tell you that what happened from that, you know, after we did the album, and I left the band a year later in '72, I was with them 67 to 71. A year later, excuse me, Roy Halley, that was Simon and Garfunkel's producer, BS&T producer on Bridge Over Troubled Water and some other stuff, not all the albums, but he was the engineer. He's a great engineer. He's a trumpet player too, classical. I didn't know that. He was the first one to double the horns, great ears, great enthusiasm. He was like riding a Bronco or something for the next lick that we play or anything. He's very exciting in the studio. He's really with us, not just turn on and fall asleep, and you know, he's really with us. So he was a producer and engineer for us too. He produced one of our albums, but mostly engineer. So with Lonesome Susie. So a year later, I'm living out in Mill Valley, California, Marin County. I get a phone call from Roy. He's in San Francisco with Art Garfunkel, who's doing his first album, first tune. And because Roy Halley calls me, he says, I want you to play piano to back up Artie on his first album on a Randy Newman tune, Old Man, about an old man dying. Beautiful, slow tune, very touching. And he said, I was totally out of shape. I am not a backup piano player for pop people. Even jazz, my time wasn't so good. I'm much better now, 20, 30 years later. But that's not my thing, you know. But he didn't know that. I was out of shape playing the piano, and I took it. So I went out there, And Artie's in another room. He's learning the tune. He's making mistakes. I'm privy to what I'm seeing now. And I did about 4 takes on the tune. They gave me sheet music. And I played some nice Fred kind of voicings and things, which were not typical for rock and roll. Slow, old man. And there's some really hip things, but because we didn't have modern equipment, we could, paste together stuff. We couldn't make a version. So out of the 4 or 5 versions, I didn't come through. And I made about $1,000 that day. Artie took me out to Fisherman's Wharf. I said, I didn't need the money. I wasn't a millionaire like him. But I said, Artie, don't pay me. He says, take the money. He was like very authoritative. So okay, I made $1,000, double scale, blah blah blah. But the point is, Roy, I said, why did you call me to do this? He says, your arrangement of Lonesome Susie is the most sensitive of any Blood, Sweat, and Tears arrangement, and that was my favorite arrangement. And I thought you'd be great for this tune, playing piano.
Some of this,
it's deep.
I'm telling you, some of that music, those horn parts and stuff, just made a profound effect on me. And sometimes it was those dissonances that resolved, and I would go to the piano and go, oh, what is that? And so I just wanted to, as I said early on, I've been waiting to talk to you since 1969, sort of so I could say that.
No, but as you just started to talk, I almost started to feel like crying, because it reminded me maybe of when I was in the studio and we finally heard it back. I felt this with a couple of my arrangements. This is just me. I'm a sensitive person. Sometimes I don't like being so sensitive. I'm not always. But I almost cried listening to my arrangement because it's very powerful. It starts out with a whisper. There's nothing, just him and a bass. And it builds. And the middle part where it starts to make the transition, we rented a baritone horn, which was the original horn that Dick Halligan wrote. I was just reading his book called Musical Being, B-E-I-N-G. It's a book about his life, very good. He has all details about his life. But he says his first instrument was a baritone horn. So in the middle, to make the transition, he goes, boo-dee-da-da, if you remember that. And then it opens up, and then the horns play that thing, ba-dee-da-da-da-da-da-da, later on. So, but it just builds, and I'm almost in tears. And our manager, who was Steve Katz was a guitar player. His brother was our manager, or lawyer, not manager, lawyer. And he came in to hear us, and he says, who's singing? Because David's very guttural, but he's going, like Art Garfunkel almost, And he changes his voice. It's like, how many singers can do that, He's singing up high, he's right in pitch, and then it's really ballsy, later on. So, but the whole chart, it was like there's nothing like that. And I remember Bob Mann, whose dad used to be the piano player or something on the Arthur Godfrey show. Bob Mann played for, with everybody. Taylor, James Taylor. He was with him for years. Perfect pitch. And he asked me one day, again, I'm not bragging, he said, who did that arrangement on Lonesome Susie? I said, I didn't. Because it's so different, Like Spinning Wheel too. That's what, and people say, where did the big band thing? I said, I listened to Benny Goodman. Yeah. Dick Halligan listened to the High-Lows, Benny, Stan Kent and all these people. So it's natural, and like I heard I'm the first one in the rock and roll books that played bebop and rock and roll on their alto solos. The first horn player to do that. I said, I didn't look in the book, but that's what I do. Mm-hmm. When I was 20 years, I hear a little Coltrane, all of a sudden I'm growling, because I heard that. I used to hear rock and roll as a kid. It's not contrived, and now you hear all these other players doing stuff,
right.
Whatever.
Well, thanks for sharing that with me. You've made an impression on a lot of people.
Thank you.
And you seem to be a spiritual man, from what I see on your website.
That's my first take on life. That's my first love of life, more than music. I was thinking, if you ask me, I love my wife, she's my sweetheart, but my spiritual path has been for half my life. And I've had a lot of spiritual experience. I'm not bragging. I tell people that look up to me, I said, look, there's little kids born today that are more mature spiritually than me, but I've been with spiritual masters hundreds and thousands of years old that have been teaching for millions of years, and I'm learning how to become a master. It's not to have any control over anybody. These masters are teaching each soul that's ready and willing how to have experience of God, which is the purpose that we're all here. Most people don't know. That's without bragging about it.
When you look at the current events, how do you justify those things for yourself?
I'm not, when I say I'm not interested, the deeper you get to love yourself as a spiritual being, as soul, an atom of God, and you start to love people more, I have a deeper feeling for life. I can't explain it. I'm not going to cry now, but and the master I study with, I'm very sensitive. He says, I hate to tell you, but the higher you go spiritually and become a master someday or in another lifetime, you become more compassionate. And I said, more? Wow. You feel, these masters know the thought of every soul in every universe of God. They know every life you've ever lived. And it's not power. They just have become one with the voice of God, which is the Holy Spirit in Christianity. We call it the Ek. It's God's love. That's all it is. It's light and sound. Interesting, because God's love is actually really light and sound, sound being the highest aspect. So being a musician, I hear Coltrane and Barry Noise people. Spiritually, to take drugs, that's not the thing. The masters don't advocate drugs at all. I don't need drugs. You can quietly sing a spiritual word, like Hu, H-U. It's an ancient name for God. And you might elevate yourself into an expanded state of consciousness where you might be on another level, way beyond these planets.
Does it come out in your saxophone?
Oh, yeah. I can't brag about it. When people heard me when I was younger, some people would touch other people, like Leonard Feather said I sounded like a wet noodle one day. So it could have hurt my feeling, but like when I play Over the Rainbow, for example, a lot of times people cry. I've never cried that I remember for Charlie Parker. These are the great, and Coltrane. The only other time I've cried, to be honest, and I won't go into a big thing about this because my wife would, I don't drive her crazy, but I heard this young pop singer. I don't follow pop anymore, more of a jazz person, but I've done all that stuff, whatever level. But I heard this girl, Charisse. You ever hear her?
No.
She's from the Philippines. I heard her when she was 15, 8 years ago. I'm almost crying now. I heard her, I start to cry. I've never heard anybody sing pop at any age, all the famous people sing as good as her. And I was weeping. I went into my wife, and her tears rolling down my face, so I said, look at this. I said, come here. We watched her. She only had 2 YouTubes out at the time. She was on the Ellen show. And Ellen said, everybody get out your handkerchiefs. And she was moved. She was like 5'1", 91 pounds. And she sang, and she got standing ovation. She came over with her mother from the Philippines. And she was crying after she finished because she got a standing ovation. She had a very rough life. A year later, she got a $13 million deal through David Foster, who's the hitman. He's got 15 gold records. And he had heard of her. He became her stepfather. She toured as the last person on the tour with famous people from Earth, Wind and Fire, anybody you can name, this little girl. But I watched her for 3 years, 2 or 3 hours at a time, at nighttime, crying, 70% of the time. I was going, I've had a lot of dreams with her. I just believe we've been together in another lifetime. I've had past lives. A lot of people don't believe in that. She's like a sweetheart to me. It's not romantic at all. I just have a deep love and joy that's unsurpassed. That I'm almost crying now.
Yeah.
It's something so. It's like I don't have any kids. If you had a 5-year-old sweetie, my wife is my sweetheart. I met her in a dream, had a romantic dream with her 2 months before I went to Japan, and I met her. And she's been my sweetheart for 33 years. And I thank God almost every day to be with her. I've hardly ever had a house with her. I've never met a real sweetheart. I've had girlfriends, I've been married before. She's just that sweet. But this girl is very humble. She can sing like an angel. I heard she breaks microphones when she sings. They're powerful. She said, what you hear is my mom. Everything you see is my mom. My mom is like, I want to be like the best daughter for my mom. And then in the last year, she came out a couple of years ago. She just had a sex operation. And she changed because when she was 13, she told Oprah, she was on the Oprah show 8 times. Oprah said, you're the most talented girl in the world. It's crazy, 8 times in 1 year. And she told Oprah in an interview 2 years ago, she said, are you a lesbian? She said, yeah. She said, when I was 13, I didn't tell my mom, but I had some relationship. But when she was singing with David Foster, 15 or 16, in front of 18,000 people with Celine, had her sing at Madison Square Garden, she got standing ovation. Celine said she sings better than me on the Oprah show the next week. Oprah said, weren't you afraid she's going to miss a note? She said, no, I knew she was going to sing better than me. I'm crying, you know.
Oh.
And, you know, so it goes on. It's just incredible. I wrote to her, it took me 3 hours to write a letter to her. And I've had a lot of beautiful 20-year-old girls, you know.
Yeah.
My wife is my sweetheart, but she's like a sweetheart. She never brags about herself, and but the thing that touched me watching her interview last year, besides saying, you know, she's gay, she said, after I sang for 18,000 people and get a standing ovation or something, I go up to my room and cry because I'm gay and no one knew. Like, I wasn't ready to tell people. I mean, it just breaks my heart.
Well, Fred, you've had an interesting life.
It's not over.
No, it's not. And I've enjoyed talking to you a lot and sort of getting a feeling for the levels that you have been through. And
yeah.
So you were curious why I called you for this, and it's partly because you had impact on me
thank you.
early on. So I wish you continued good luck. And
thank you. The last thing that I would just say for me, and I mentioned to a few students, this is just me, so it's not for anybody, it's just to think about. My only reason, I think, for playing now and just being is to serve others. I don't know if Charlie Parker was really doing that or Coltrane. Mm-hmm. I don't know, and I'm not judging. And I told my wife, I said, I have no other reason to be living now. I mean, I love you, you know, I've had a lot of experiences. I've gone through a lot of heavy stuff too with me and my wife. But I just feel my whole purpose is I've had a lot of gifts in my life, good parents, a lot of close friends in my life, some very painful things, but as long as I can take care of myself, is to encourage others to go on, and whatever your dream is, in a good, positive way, do it. You know, because a lot of people are going through a lot of pain, and I know that feeling. Yeah. So I'm there for them as much as, without being cocky about it. Yeah. That's just in my heart now. It wasn't when I was younger. Right. There's a strong purpose. So.
That's a great note to wrap up on. Thank you very much.